I want to say to young men, like, you need to man up, pray for a wife, get married, have a family. What are you doing in this perpetual adolescence, this Peter Pan? It's not God's will for you.
Listen, if they've got any kind of like zit-faced 18-year-old guy who's pressing to the hoop, Eric, that's trying to be, that's trying to win her hand for a date, they're saying, you read Lionhearted first, and if you obey it, then maybe we'll talk about, having coffee and stuff.
But before we get into our conversation, my name's Eric Metaxas, and this channel exists to bring you a biblical perspective on today's news, culture, and hot-button issues. If you're new here or not, welcome, and be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you are notified when new videos get posted. Hey folks, welcome back. You know how much I love Doug Giles, just love to talk to him. He's the author of many books. The new one is called Lionhearted, Making Young Christian Males Rowdy Biblical Men. This is a great book for men's group studies. Lionhearted. Doug Giles, welcome back.
Eric, how you doing, big dog?
Doing all right. You always encourage me. Thank you for that. There's a lot to talk about in the news that relates to your book, Lionhearted, and why Christian men in particular need to read your book, because very few pastors are coming at this truly biblically, which you do. What should we talk about in the news? The insane news 2 days ago that Matthew Perry, at age 54, was found dead in a hot tub. That's kind of like a I don't know. It's just do we know anything? I'll be honest. I always suspect the vaccine when it's heart failure or whatever. We still don't know how he died, but I'll be honest. I've had so many friends. And friends of friends die suddenly, like this is a new thing. But I really didn't follow Matthew Perry's career. But what did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I'm not a big Friends fan. My forte was Seinfeld. I found that
that's why I like you, because you're not a big Friends fan. But go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, they're Seinfeld. It's dark, weird, no lessons, no hugs, that kind of stuff. And but as I was looking into the Matthew Perry death, he said that, according to his memoir, that he prayed to God that God would make him famous. And then after, I think, $60+ million spent on rehab, 17 times he went in, couldn't exorcise the demons, Eric. And he said in his autobiography that fame was the worst thing that could ever have happened to him. And you get a lot of, people in Christian churches, evangelicalism, they long to be famous. Instead of longing to be, purposeful, instead of longing to be, considered great before the audience of one, they want the adulation of the masses. And Perry got that. He got $1 million an episode, super famous, movies included on top of that. And he lost his whole life, man. I don't know if he was redeemed, but it's an ignoble death to die in a hot tub. And he's got the world in New York City, at his behest. And he said that it made him miserable. And he goes back to the maxim, that Jesus said in Matthew. It's like, what does it profit you to get all this crap and you lose your soul in the process? So young people, if you're going to focus on something, focus on seeking first the kingdom of God. Focus on that which is holy, just, and good. And if God wants to fluff your pillow with some fame, so be it. C'est la vie. But this is a short life, man. And young people, just like Paul told Titus, tell the young men to take their life seriously and not, pursue that which is vanity and goofy. And I think that's a takeaway, for the young ones.
Well, what people don't realize, because you can't, is that show business and fame and all that stuff is mostly an illusion, in the sense that they're never going to show you their misery, the crying in the pillow, that, they're not, you're only going to see these images, and you're going to say, oh, that's great, I want that. And anybody would want that. That's kind of normal. You go, oh, it'd be great to be famous. I did a Socrates in the City event with Dick Cavett. This is over 10 years ago. What is the price of fame? And the reason I invited him to be my guest at Socrates in the City wasn't just because he's known every famous person ever. He knew them personally. But he made a comment. when Elizabeth Taylor died. You know, you don't get more famous than Elizabeth Taylor. And when she died, he was on like Larry King or one of those shows. I don't know if it was Piers Morgan. And to hear Dick Cavett say this, it kind of really, I thought, this is interesting because he's not coming from a biblical worldview. But he said, do not envy these people. He says you cannot imagine the pain in Elizabeth Taylor's life. You think everything is wonderful. She and Richard Burton, both alcoholics, addicted to drugs. Unbelievable pain and misery and Sturm und Drang. Yeah. You're not going to see that. He saw that, and he talked about that. And I was just amazed. I said, I want to have a Socrates in the City conversation with him, which people can go to Socrates in the City and watch it. But I thought, coming from him, that was really interesting. And you're saying the same thing, that you don't have any idea what comes with that. It's like saying, I want to be rich. Well, yeah, I get it. Money's nice to have, but you have no idea. I've met tons and tons of wealthy people who couldn't be more miserable. So we need to rehearse the basics, I guess.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to Paul's maxim to Titus in regards to young men that my book Lionhearted is aimed at. Instead of pursuing this golden ring, this influence, I'm going to be famous, people are going to love me. Man, I would heartily advise for people, if your holy grail is anything, make it the purpose of God, make it the establishment of His kingdom. Because this is a short life, Eric. If you and I roll it out to like 99 or whatever, that's still a flippin' vapor. And we're going to have to stand before the audience of one at the judgment seat. And if we've squandered our life, if we hadn't redeemed the time, if we've been knuckleheads as young guys and stupid fools as old dudes, then we're going to have this thing called a massive load of regret. And I tell the young people in Lionhearted to do the opposite of what Chandler Bing and Matthew Perry did, is take your life seriously. I had this billionaire tell me, Eric, when I was a young squab, just got married. He said, "What are you going to do with your life?" It's like, "I want to preach the gospel. I want to spread the love of Jesus out there." And he said, "Dude, don't take your life so seriously." He had a Matthew Perry-like death just 3 years ago. And I'm glad that I didn't take frat boys' advice, and I took my life seriously, and I, albeit halting and stammering and sinful, but I took my life seriously and rolled it out for the kingdom of God. And guess what, Eric? There's perks involved, I've been blessed, been crazily blessed by the Lord, but I took my life seriously, took His word seriously, took the gospel seriously, and, didn't pursue vanity, because I'd already done that, man, between the ages of 12 and 21 as a drug dealer, as a thief. I had lots of money because we're dealing lots of weed, lots of cocaine, and lots of LSD. And when Christ clocked me, guess what? I didn't want that crap anymore. And I decided, instead of being a fool and continuing that glide path, is that I want to follow God, man. I want what He wants me to have. I want to be great in His eyes, not frickin' TMZ's eyes. And
wow.
Like Dick Cavett,
well, that's and look, and that's I wrote a book called 7 Men and the Secret of Their Greatness, and it's this stuff on a different level. It's historical figures, but the question is, what is God's idea of what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman? God's idea is what you want to get on board with, folks, and you cannot imagine how many people like Matthew Perry, they're just sucked down this path. They're looking for something. What they're really looking for is God, and they didn't know it. And it is so tragic when you see it in people's lives. We've all known people like this, and that's why I think, Doug, you and me, we know it is only by God's grace that we've achieved anything. We know that. That's not like we're supposed to say that. We know that it is only by God's grace. We could be like Matthew Perry or like a host of people that they don't know what they're looking for. They're drifting around looking for something, and we're gonna cut to the chase because time is short. Jesus is the answer, and a life of meaning given over to Him. It's just the only way to fly. And folks, you need to know that is true. That's not our point of view. That is true. That will bless you if you take that seriously.
Yeah, and you got a lot of young men think that they're invincible, that they've got, plenty of time to, take life seriously, Eric. And nobody knows. Nobody knows what tomorrow holds. I've had buddies, man, that were in their late teens and early 20s that poof, they're gone, they're dead, and they didn't take their life seriously. They had tragedy, happen in their life, and then they're gone. And man, I can't stand over their caskets and say, they're in heaven now, and have the grave sanctify them, because they didn't take their life seriously. They led a totally rebellious, sinful life. And again, going back to Paul's maxim to Titus, it's like, young men, take your life seriously. Redeem your time. Get filled with the Word of God. Become strong and vigorous, and overcome the devil. Because again, all of us must appear, young people included, before the judgment seat of Christ. Matthew Perry is going to go before the judgment seat of Christ. You will, I will. And, the whole message in Lionhearted is, hey, young dudes, I know there's a lot of fun out there, a lot of cool things to pursue and want to be, but we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ and make sure what you're pursuing is holy, just, and good.
I want to do a Doug Giles translation of the New Testament, because you said earlier that life is a flippin' vapor. Actually, that's Old Testament. But I know that if you really are familiar with the nuances of the Hebrew, flippin' vapor, life is a flippin' vapor, comes very close to the actual Hebrew meaning. But that's what we're talking about. Life is short. You need to get serious about what you're doing with your life. But especially, Doug, this is, again, why I love you, because young men, I mean, how many times do we hear Christian young women say, like, we're the men in this church. They're all like boys. They haven't grown up. They haven't gotten serious. They haven't manned up, in a sense. Yep. I want to say to young men, like, you need to man up, pray for a wife, get married, have a family. What are you doing? What are you doing in this perpetual adolescence, this Peter Pan, Hugh Hefner, whatever it is? It's not God's will for you. When are you going to get serious?
Yeah, the Peterson translation in Ephesians 4, Paul exhorts the church in Ephesus to have no prolonged infancies amongst the church. And we're wet nursing, people all the way up into their 40s, still living with mommy, still getting, government cheese, living in a van down by the river. And in regards to, finding like young women in this book, Lionhearted, making young Christian males rowdy biblical men, the women are glamming onto it. And they're saying, listen, if they've got any kind of like zit-faced 18-year-old guy who's pressing to the hoop, Eric, that's trying to be, that's trying to win her hand for a date, they're saying, you read Lionhearted first. Yeah. And if you obey it, like, I don't know, for 2 years, then maybe we'll talk about, having coffee and stuff. Yeah. But one of the things that we were talking about earlier that's in the news, the bowling alley massacre in Lewiston, Maine. Oh man. It's like, how does my book address that? Well, here's how it addresses that. And I guarantee, Eric, that there's no youth pastor, there's very few youth groups that are out there that tell the young Christian evangelical sassy males that they need to be a protector. They need to know how to fight. They need to know how to use edged weapons. They need to know how to double tap the center mass of any jackass that wants to hurt them, hurt their loved ones, or hurt innocent people. And I wrote this to 16 to 25-year-olds, and I'm like, hey, Dinky, do you know how to fight? Do you carry a sidearm with you, if it's legal in your state? Do you know how to use a knife? Because we're in Thunderdome, man. It's crack night in the Ferret Hut. You can't, go bowling and be at peace with it because, some Robert Card who's hearing the voices is going to come in there and light the place up. I guarantee if that would have happened, and if I wouldn't have got killed, Eric, I've got a gun on me always. I'm here alone on my big, beautiful property. I'm still carrying a gun. That if I didn't get shot by that maniac, that I would at least put a couple of rounds by the moron's head. And that's just the way that I was raised. I think that, again, youth pastors in this evil day, not only it's like, teaching people how to prosper and teaching people how to be good and nice and love Grandy, they need to have weapons classes, and they need to take all their young men and women to jujitsu courses or Krav Maga or something like that. My two daughters are black belts in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and they've had them for like 6 years, and they've been training for nearly 20. This is no kidding. I mean, you look at all the stuff coming over in the border. We got 8 million new people that are OTMs other than Mexicans. There's people from Yemen, Syria, China, and they're all in here now. They've infiltrated. What are they here for? To clean our sheets and pick oranges and mow our yard? No, they're not. I think they're insurgents, and I think that when they get the high sign, that they're going to light up some places. And this is not your normal, typical little Mayberry RFD type day. And for youth pastors or pastors to ignore this garbage and not tell people, listen, you need to buy a sword, okay? And we're not talking about a decorative sword. We're talking about a dagger that taps lungs. That's what Jesus told the boys in Luke 22:36. The equivalent thereof would be a semi-automatic rifle, shotgun, pistol, and become proficient in it and have at least 1,000 rounds per caliber or gauge of the weapon that you own. Because again, this is not a normal day, man. And
well, again, you're talking about people. Young men are hungry for this, for straight talk, and to be a man means, you're going to protect the weak. You're going to use your strength as a man to protect those who don't have that strength. That's why God gave you that strength, to be that hero, to be chivalrous. The church has been really feminized, and it's fascinating to me because it's part of, if you're the devil, how do you attack America? By attacking men, to tell them we don't want you to be too manly because that's scary and toxic and whatever. Of course, God's idea of manhood is we're supposed to be scary to evildoers, not to those we love and want to protect. But that's part of the culture that you're trying to communicate. That this is a biblical idea of manhood. This is not Doug Giles's idea of manhood.
Yeah, I got a chapter in there on nicknames, Eric. George on Seinfeld wanted to be named T-Bone. You got James and John in the New Testament. They're sons of thunder. They're like Georgia redneck monster truck drivers. You got Barnabas was son of encouragement. Imagine that, a Christian being encouraging. And then you've got Elijah got a nickname, Eric. And Jezebel called him, and Ahab called him, rather, the troublemaker. And I tell young people, it's like, if you want a nickname, a really cool nickname, have something that's pure evil. Have some witch who's mixed, Baal worship with Jehovah. Have that control freak lady who manipulates, intimidates, and dominates. Have those people that embody that nastiness call you a troublemaker. That's a badge of honor. And the apostate teachers in first century church, they called Paul and they called Silas, called them troublemakers. They said, you upset the world. And that was a dig at them. And young people should be like that. It's like, instead of like, I want to be nice and wear a cardigan, and that's what my Christianity is going to be all about. No, you need to be a troublemaker. If something's evil, if it's full of lies, hype, and spin, if it's crap and somebody's trying to masquerade it as, Christianity or good policy, no, you need to blow it up. You need to be the one who confronts it. You need to be the troublemaker that sets things right. I mean, look at with Ahab and Jezebel, they had 100 prophets and they were hiding in the caves. Obadiah had them hiding in the caves. Prophets don't belong in caves hiding. Prophets belong where Elijah was, giving her and her stupid husband a lot of grief. And he wore, I guarantee when they called him troublemaker, he wore that badge with just this thing called glee and honor.
Well, to get back to the main shooting, when I'm in places where there's a lot of guns, I never feel safer. Let's be honest. I mean, the idea that the left in America and some, I believe you would call them wusses on the right, that they talk about gun violence, like the guns are like leaping out of boxes and shooting people. No, it's not gun violence. It is evil. It is people using the guns for violence to do harm. We need people who have guns to use them to protect us from the people doing the violence. But this lie that every time there's some kind of a mass shooting, they talk about it like it's gun violence. And I just think, like, if everybody in that bowling alley had a gun, he wouldn't have been able to kill those people.
Yeah.
And we know this is true. And I want to say too, like, there's a level of the demonic. He was hearing voices, and we say, oh, it's schizophrenia. Did you ever think that it's demonic voices telling you to kill? Do we not? I mean, those of us who call ourselves Christians, do you not understand that that's a thing, that is a real thing, that happens to people? But we have to put it in this psychological category. Now, it could have been a psychological thing, but in many, many cases, these are the voices of demons. So this is at its heart a spiritual issue. We've had tons of guns in America, and we didn't have mass shootings until the last few decades. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah, we used to bring guns to our high school to go hunt quail or dove after school was out. And we got in fights, we did drugs, we did all this stuff, Eric, but nobody ever pulled out a gun and started strafing the crowd. But in regards to the evil that's behind this, and what's going down in the Middle East, and what China's cooking, God only knows, and what's happening in the United States of liberal acrimony, again, for young people, it's like, you got to understand, this is an evil day, and we're not victims. And yes, get prepped from a physical standpoint, learn how to fight, learn how to use edged weapons, learn how to use firearms, get proficient in it. Absolutely. But you also got an arsenal called imprecatory prayers that you could be laying down incredible, spiritual carpet bombs on all these demons that are running amok and stuff. And again, most youth pastors, they don't even know what an imprecatory prayer is.
Well, they're not going to get near this stuff, so please continue.
Right. Yeah, and so when all this stuff happens, everybody's like, oh, pray, pray for this and pray for that. Like, pray what? How about pray Psalm 35, where God says he's going to turn the enemy into snail slime? How about pray Psalm 109, where God says that these people that are coming up with all this evil and all these horrendous machinations, how about we reverse the curse, and what they plan for evil upon innocent people, boom, it lands on their head instead. And again, it's just, I bounced through all that stuff in Lionhearted for young men, because this stuff, Eric, is not being touched with a 10-foot pew in most youth groups, in most churches. Yeah. And a lot of young men are like, what the heck should I be doing right now, seeing this intergalactic, international, demonic, outpouring? Yeah. So it's a few things that you could be doing.
Well, the first thing you could do is get a copy of Lionhearted, folks, because we need to spread this message. Doug, I'm so grateful for you. I just can't tell you. I'm so grateful for you and your heart. You are Lionhearted. We have authority in our prayers. And my friend Mike Thompson, who wrote a book called Third Heaven Authority, there is fire, there is power in our prayers. Yep. And we need to be taught to pray that way. Oftentimes, people pray and it's like, oh, Lord, and I go, what?
There's no faith in it.
Where's the fire? Do you not understand? You've been given the authority by God to pray in his name, and there's such power in that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great chapters in my book, Lionhearted, Making Young Christian Males Rowdy Biblical Men. The first one, though, Eric, is I titled it, If You Get This Wrong, Everything is Wrong. And if young men out there are 16 to 25 and they think Jesus is some bearded lady walking around, like Catherine Kuhlman in a beige peignoir, spitting out more aphorisms than an over-medicated Joel Osteen on a 3-day Mountain Dew bender.
I just took a drink of water and I almost lost it. That was very cruel what you just did, Doug Giles. Jesus is a bearded lady, just like Catherine Kuhlman in a what?
Walking around in a beige peignoir.
In a beige peignoir. Most people don't know. Peignoir. Peignoir. Or maybe it's Noir. Peignoir. That is so. But apart from the fact that it's hilarious, it is so true. Jesus was a manly man who breathed fire on the Pharisees. The things that he said to them, we need to understand, folks, he was not winsome. And if you want to be like Jesus, it means sometimes you're not going to be winsome. Sometimes you're going to breathe fire from heaven. And
Yeah, but how many pastors and priests are, modeling that? I know it's a little bit more in vogue nowadays. I've been writing about it, and you and I've been talking about it for 20 plus years. And but still, it's like the pastors are sweeties. They're little Mr. Rogers, or they're cool, hip Jimmy Fallon like. And man, I hope, Eric, when I die and go to heaven, that we got video of Christ preaching with authority, John the Baptist. Love to see them, how they did it compared to the stuff that we peddle today. I'd love to see the Apostle Paul being in the temple upbraiding, all the people that crucified Christ, and hear him and Peter just pop off. Man, that's got to be some of the most glorious preaching known to mankind. And if young people, the little 16 to 25-year-old dinky male, if they don't see Christ as a 30-year-old rebel from Galilee, then I think their whole Christianity is off kilter, and they're never going to get anything right about what he said and did, and how they're to emulate and imitate the Son of God.
Well, I have a book coming out in April, and I talk about the idol of winsomeness. It doesn't mean that there aren't times we're called to be winsome, obviously, but this idea that this is the mode, that we're always supposed to be winsome, that's not just not true. It is a lie from the pit of hell. And the idea that many Christians have bought into this, and that many pastors, youth pastors are peddling this, young men need to be, as you put it, rowdy. They need to be scary to the forces of evil, because they know the authority that they have in Christ and how God made them. So I appreciate that. Folks, the book is Lionhearted. 30 seconds left, Doug, to say whatever you want to say.
I hope all the young men that feel this, and the women that also feel, that they're being suppressed and they've got this fire burning in their heart, I hope they step to the forefront, start leading prayer meetings, start leading home groups, doing outreaches, rebuking their pastors and their worship leaders if they're peddling, this emasculated gospel and stuff. Start their own church.
Oh, yeah.
This is a time, man, for the boys to step to the curb, and for the men to step to the forefront.
And this is what I'm saying, folks. If you're going to a church like this, get out. For the sake of your soul, get out. Get out. The book is Lionhearted. Doug Giles, Giles, has been my guest. Doug Giles, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure, buddy.